are your value propositions. But if there's somebody who's coming and having a chat with you and saying, you know, I'd be happier actually working for a big brand, you should let the guy go. So there are some telltale signs that kind of come out. The other issue that you will face is instead of interviewing maybe about 5 or 7 people and finding one good person, you probably will have to interview maybe 25 or 30 people to find that one good person. But go for culture, go for commitment, and go for passion, not necessarily a been there and done that. Okay? To answer your question about scaling the organization and going multi-location, it's a problem we faced, but actually our timing was horrible. I opened an office in Bangalore, Jan 2008, shut it down December 2008, okay? Had 3 people as leaders to run that place in those 12 months. The issue that we faced is, you know what, at that level, people would rather get a salary instead of being a little more committed towards it. The issue that you will probably face is that the person that you hire, you will have extremely high expectations that he's going to run the business just the way you do. Remember, that's a myth. It's not going to happen. Okay? You are still the only person who is the most accountable person to run the business over there. That other person is just going to follow suit. Going back to that whole story about micromanagement, super important. Okay? But if you can do the good combination of finding people with a high level of energy and commitment and passion, they may not necessarily come from your line of business, but they may be people who might be excited to do whatever they're doing and preferably have a background of being more stable. Couple it with your micromanagement aspects and also make sure that you're taking the decisions and the person understands exactly what's expected. And I think that will probably work better.
I'm getting edgy because I think we've jumped the gun. The panel, I think I see a few faces actually in the audience. I can name them, but I'll not name them. Who are working in companies, who want to be entrepreneurs, and they keep on coming to me and saying, how do you do it? So I want to get their voice in and have a question or two. I know you have a question, ma'am. I do have a question where you talked about the tinkering you want to do because you're an entrepreneur. And there's a role that co-founders can play, as sounding boards or as your own immediate folks who can keep you sort of in check. A chief operating officer next to you can actually keep you in check more. So I want to invite Rajat and Alok both for this, which is, I want to start. Do I go solo or go with co-founders? How to take that call and how to get ready for it? In fact, in your case, Rajat, you've been working together. 2 of you have co-founded this company, and 7 years later, it's still going strong. So how do you identify, if you said, I want to go with a co-founder, how do you identify the right person to work with? And Alok, if you can also help us when you are looking at newer plans, investment ideas, how do you judge that? Is 2 more, 3 more, 4 less? That'll be great. And then we'll take your question, ma'am. And that'll be the last question for our panel, unless there's some more excitement here. Okay.
In our case, actually, we were in the boarding together. So we met, I was the vendor and he was the customer, he was an ophthalmologist. And I think to find a co-founder, you need to drink. So this discussion happened on the 4th peg, large peg in City Club.
Can people tweet this part on Twitter?
Sorry?
Can people tweet this part on Twitter? Or this is
yeah, our story, so in our company, this is strong that we started with a teacher and now we moved on. So therefore, so on that discussion, we went to a level where I was frustrated and I said, I'm extremely frustrated about what I'm doing. He said, I want to also do something big. So therefore, we started. Now, coming to, let's say, if I were to, let's say, decompose this, I think it's very important to have a co-founder. And it's, apart from that, I think the structure of founding has to be such that one guy, when you start the company, has to be bigger than the other. And that has to be established at the start. So therefore, when we started the company, my partner had 51% share and I had 49%. We had a choice of having 50-50, but he's a doctor and this is an ophthalmology company, so therefore, doctor has to be supreme. So in case of any dispute, if we both have a dispute, which we always have in a closed door, his word is better than mine, and that I have accepted, and that doesn't come in our ego. Second thing is both our strengths, my strength is his weakness, his strength is my weakness. So therefore, both of us cannot run the company without each other. So therefore, even if we have disputes, we will have to resolve it. If we don't resolve it, the company is gone, because I can't run ophthalmology, he can't run management. So therefore, it's very important to have 2 co-founders whose strengths are different and weaknesses are different. If you have both the co-founders.
So agreed. So co-founder is necessary. Now, how many is good enough? Is it 2, 3, 1? Sorry, I just have to manage time because there's a lot more that we can share. Just
So again, I agree with Rajat. I mean, now since how many is too many? I would say anything more than 4 is too much. Again, there is no thumb rule, there is no golden rule to these things. I'm just giving a gut. It is also quite likely that you might find that you start a company, 1 year down the road, one co-founder departs. And one of the things that I find which is usually not discussed well amongst the founders are the dispute resolution mechanisms that Rajat talked about. What happens if one wants to leave? What happens to that equity? And those are the kind of things that nobody wants to touch because people think that, I'm not being loyal to either the startup or I'm not being a good team player if I'm sort of bringing up these issues. But I think it's very, very important for co-founders to discuss these kind of issues. But do you want to go with co-founders rather than alone? I would say very strong view that you should certainly go with co-founders. I mean, as a VC, it's not that we don't fund companies which are solo founded, but we'll have a very strong bias towards founding teams as opposed to a founding person.
Great, thank you so much. Let's take your question, ma'am. Identify yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Vasanthi. Now the fact that there is no woman on this panel makes it seem as if there are not enough bug-bitten women in this country. I want to ask you, is that true? Now, I would rather, in the interest of time, direct it to Alok first. So what is the real story? Are there not enough women startup people? Is there not enough appetite for risk? To you, Rajat, I would ask, have you seen women in your space of, struggling to have a startup? Let me quickly tell you that I don't think it's a problem only with the Indian scenario, because I was reading something regarding the Silicon Valley, and there they say that it could be because women are trying to start a family just at the same time that men are thinking of starting a startup. So is that true?
I joke about marriage and mortgages, keep them...
Myself, I've been a venture capitalist for a very short while, actually. I must have looked at about somewhere in the ballpark of 250 to 300 companies at least. And I would say the number of companies that I've looked at which have even one co-founder as a woman, I think are certainly less than 5%. I would say maybe even 2% or somewhere in that ballpark. It's very low. It's actually much lower than what I encountered in my undergrad days at IIT or somewhere else. That ratio actually becomes even more extreme in case of entrepreneurship. I don't think it has anything to do with women not being able to being entrepreneurs. I think the kind of issues that you raised about, it can be many different family constraints which happen at the same time when you are at the peak of your energy level and risk appetite level to be able to start companies. My wife is an entrepreneur. She's now a second-time entrepreneur, and she has a far better risk appetite than I do for sure. But is it possible? Yes, but I think it's the same kind of constraints that you see I could ask the question, why are there not as many women board members in large companies? I would argue that many of the factors are very similar that drive those things. Do women make excellent entrepreneurs? The answer is absolutely yes, without a doubt.
Are there typical sectors that women take up when it is an entrepreneur? Because I myself get called to speak to something called HEN, which is Her Entrepreneurial Network. But then it all seems to be in the area of what they call the gentle sort of this thing, like clothes and food and stuff like that. But then what is it about the technical part? Which is why I thought even if Rajat can share, what's the scene?
I know a lady from my institute who was in private equities who quit 2 years back, and now is running a dental chain startup, 6 centers, and also creating a pathology center in Bombay. So but I think the traits are very similar. You need to be mad to be there. So therefore, she's figured it out. She's got her mother with her family, so that she can actually spend a lot of time on this. So personally, I think this is, if you can figure it out, if you can convince your parents to stay with you and settle down a lot of things, I think probably you...
I think there is a sector, okay, which is professional services. A couple of the things that I do, one is a headhunting company, the second is a writing services company. I see a lot of women entrepreneurs. I think they do really well in this. People like yourself. In fact, one of our co-founders in corner office is a person who has a very strong PR background. So at the end of the day, the point is that such industries is where you probably will see vis-a-vis your typical internet startup or a research kind of an organization or all that. I actually see a lot of them over there.
I also have one of my friends from my batch whose wife was a journalist in Z News and now creating content for a lot of TV shows abroad. So therefore, she's also she's also started her own website. So I think it's about, again, the same thing, whether you have that passion to move ahead. So. Numbers are low.
And I won't even bucket them into any particular sector, whether that's a good sector or a bad sector. I mean, we have had some great women entrepreneurs that we have funded in the past. I don't think that them, including tech, e-commerce, whatever it might choose, there are enough examples that we get. I don't think there is a particular sector to be chosen. But one for bites, you can't resist.
So we can continue this conversation. You have the hashtag and you have the Twitter handle. You can pop your questions and we'll try to get you an answer from the panel or perhaps from each one of us. We can contribute to the discussion online. Rajesh, with your permission, can we just bring the panel to a close? Is that okay? Yeah, great. So thank you for your time, and we've run out of time actually. We're 10 minutes over what we had said we'll do, but it's been a wonderful interaction with you so far. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you to the audience. Thank you.
Yes, nicely into the evening. Shall we have I think people are stepped out for a coffee or something. Shall we have a 5 minutes break?
5 minutes break would be great.
This panel in which we thought we wanted to really bring up the role of passions in your own success, and we didn't want to make it like a hobby or a work-life balance sort of approach, but really say in today's day and age when things are so undefined and so uncertain and so ambiguous in many ways, it's not really the scientific part of your brain that gets you success or gets you the breakthrough. It probably forms the base, but beyond that there is something extra, whatever you call it, your sixth degree, your intuition, which probably comes from somewhere within and which comes from your really igniting your own passions, being yourself and being in your zone. And I think each one has a different thing that brings you to your zone. And we try to gather a very interesting set of people who've done that despite everything and been successful, and at the same time very successful professionals as well. So without much further ado, I'll pass on the mic to Michael. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Let's just start this part. Doesn't matter. Let's just start by having the panelists come up on stage right away. The topic of our talk is being what you want to be, the role of personal passions in your career. And we have 4 very accomplished people, each one with one or several passions that they have been pursuing either for a long while or just started pursuing it recently. And I think the most important thing about this particular panel is the story that each of these 4 professionals have. So why don't I just start passing on the microphone to Win and ask you to give us maximum 5 minutes that covers your story and your beliefs when it comes to the balance work-passion.
Thanks, Michael, and I'm delighted to be here. My name is Winifred Knight, and I'm from South Africa. And I'm a serial entrepreneur. More than that, I'm a serial lifestyle entrepreneur. And the reason I'm saying that is that I started my very first business when I was 4 years old. I ran away to school when I was 4. They couldn't send me back, and I then had to make sure I have money to pay for the additional things that I wanted. So I grew vegetables and sold that in the marketplace. So what happened at that moment, I realized that there would never be a distinction between my personal life and my professional and working life. And that is what has happened throughout. I worked for several companies in a corporate environment as a CMO, group marketing managers and so on. But it was the personal interventions in my life that made me a good marketer. Being hands-on, know what I want to do, managing whatever by walking around. Then I met up with my business partner because I knew that eventually I wanted to go into my own business. Corporate was stifling. I couldn't understand their reasoning. I couldn't understand how they could call budgets in marketing when it's an investment in your customer rather than a budget, because a budget you spend, you can cut, investment you can't, it grows, and so on. So we started 3 businesses. One was our consulting business, and for me the consulting business in business was that I would write a strategy for a client to grow his business. In my personal life, I use a similar strategy to buy a home or do something to grow my assets. There was no borderline in it. The second was that we started to train and educate people, because I'm a firm believer in everything that I learn to share it with people. So we became trainers, in-house trainers, educators, learners. The same things that I learned on how to develop a database was the same thing that I used, the methodologies, to actually plant tomatoes. The third business we have is called themarketingsite.com, where we aggregated and consolidated all our information, and we put that onto a marketing portal, which is free to everybody and anywhere in the world. And out of the marketing portal, I developed various other entities and to supplement my personal life, and my personal life of being homes, renovating them, selling them, and designs and all of that. Being extremely blessed with our companies, I it came from the foundation of my parents, is to pay forward. And by paying forward, because I buy homes, renovate them, I've got a certificate in bricklaying and carpentry and electricity and plumbing and so on, that I actually could go out with Habitat for Humanity and build homes for people all over the world. My last one was in Guatemala in Central America. So with that, I could pay forward. I adopt donkeys in Cape Town that I look after. I adopt gardens in Johannesburg. And everything that I do in my professional life, I do in my personal life. Louisa and I, when we started our business, had 3 philosophies and 3 rules that we worked to in our lifetime of 16 years. The one was that we make money to travel. And that's why we're in India and we travel all over the world. The second one is that we will never, ever, ever fight over money. And we never fight over money. Louisa makes the money, I spend it. So it's very easy. And the third thing was that we will be good to family, friends, colleagues, and people, because that enriched our lives. To this day, I don't see the difference. Whatever I do in my professional life, I take over into my business life and my private life, and vice versa.
Thank you so much. We'll get back to you. So the next of our panelists has a bit of a different story because he's somebody who went from the biggest software company in the world to the biggest fruit in the world. So let's hear your story.
Thank you, Michael. So for most of you, I'm James Joseph. I've 18 years in the corporate world in 3 continents. Started off in fact, it all started from here itself. My first job was in Delhi. How many of you were in Delhi in 95, 96, 97? Okay. So every Friday I used to make this trip from the Mehrauli, from Nehru Place to Gurgaon. My customer was Maruti. So one of those trips I was reading, used to be a shop called Deja Vu on the way. By the way, now that's something which I just noticed. So there was a article in Times of India sent. So what does it take to be a global manager? So I was working for 3M at that time. And then it said you need to have 3 large market experience, and you need to have an international degree. So I went on to do all that. 18 years, I went around the world, worked in 3 different multinational companies, worked in US, Europe, and came back to India. So I was with Microsoft last. But the part which I was invited here first was about how the last 4 years of my job, I managed that from my hometown in Kerala. Did manage a national role from my home in Kerala. It was the best work-life balance decision in my life. So I call it come home. And it was the best, and I went on to win the highest award at Microsoft. So performance never suffered by doing that. So then I decided to take a year off to write about this experience of what I call the joy of working for India, which is the metros, but live in Bharat. One is for your professional life, your professional, whereas for your spirit, you want to be close to your home. You're back to your roots. So I took a year off for that, and that's when there was an idea which I had in my mind. So 3 years ago, at a dinner in Taj Mahal Palace in Mumbai, one of those dinners which was actually prepared for Michelle Obama and Barack Obama when they were in India, that was prepared for my clients. And there was one particular dish, and to cut the story short, I asked the chef, how come you didn't consider jackfruit instead of mushroom for this particular dish? And he gave me answers. It's sticky, smelly, and seasonal. No way it can be brought to the kitchen in a 5-star hotel. It's too messy to prepare. Okay, the whole jackfruit is 10 kilos. And when you start cutting it off, it's got a glue in it, and it's absolutely messy. So nobody wants to touch it. And once the fruit turns sweet, the aroma spreads in the kitchen. It can go into other dishes. And it's seasonal. It's not available throughout the year. So those are I call it sticky, smelly, and seasonal. Now, why jackfruit? I grew up with this saying at home that if you have a jackfruit tree in your yard, it extends a human life by 10 years. It's because that's how nutritious and fibrous that fruit is. During the season, you consume so much, it has a very positive effect on you. And there are enough studies out there about the nutritional benefits of jackfruit. So then at that time, I just took a mental note, okay, if McDonald's can do veggie burger, why can't a jackfruit burger? Okay, that is what I had in my mind. Since I took a time off, when I was back in Kerala last season, in December 2012, when the first jackfruit came out from our tree, I took that and I gave it to a chef who had just come back from Scotland. So I gave it to him. I said, okay, can you make a burger with this? So he made the burger. It came out really well. But I was a supply chain consultant for IT technologies back in the US, and I studied the supply chain of taking frozen burgers to the cities. And then I realized the cold chain in India is broken. People turn off the freezers in the shops, they turn it off. That is enough for the burger to get spoiled. Whereas exporting is fine, because the cold chain outside India is fine, but in India that is an issue. That's when, then eventually I went on to research on this and found out that, okay, freeze-drying a fruit can solve all these problems. It came from a person whom I met 15 years ago in a train, and then I asked him, he used to export green pepper to the US, and I asked him, how do you export? He said, I dehydrate green pepper, then the chef in the US will rehydrate and cook. I said, can I do the same thing for jackfruit? He said, okay, then for jackfruit, you may want to consider freeze-drying. I asked him, what is freeze-drying? It's the same technology as cup of noodles. When you buy a cup of noodles, it is very light, dry, but when you want to have, you peel off the seal, add hot water, it comes back to the original noodle. That's the same technology. So I explored jackfruit freeze-drying, and then I got the freeze-dried jackfruit fruit, and then I gave it to the chef. He made a jackfruit pie. Okay, made a jackfruit pie, and I used to, I don't know, how many of you like apple pie? How do you have it? Do you have it with ice cream? Ice cream? Straight up. Straight up. Do you know why you have to have it with ice cream? Because it's sour. They always, the biggest con job by ice cream manufacturers is use Granny Smith apple for apple pie. Because you always have to buy ice cream. Because it's not sweet. Whereas the jackfruit, pecan pie is more sweeter. Whereas jackfruit pie is even sweeter than pecan pie. It is so delicious. It's tasty and healthy. You can even feel the fiber when you eat it. So that was what I call the serendipity moment. Okay, and what is serendipity? So to me, and Alok mentioned about it, okay, it's you're falling in love with something. So when I made the jackfruit pie, that is when, there is the former founder of Microsoft Research in Cambridge, he said, what is serendipity? It's about you're searching for a needle in a haystack, and you find the farmer's daughter and decide to fall in love. Okay, that is what serendipity is. So to me, I was after a jackfruit burger. The moment I touched the jackfruit pie, I realized, okay, this freeze-dried foam, that's from a supply chain point of view, if you think about a 5 kilo fruit, when you peel it off and take the bulb out, you get 1 kilo of fruit, of which 82% is water. And when you extract the water out, it becomes 180 gram. So a 5 kilo jackfruit is what you have in this pack. You shrink it to 180 gram. Okay, and once it comes to your home, within 10 minutes you can rehydrate and it's back to the original, like the noodles. It's back to the original, and you can make any dish with it. So then I started, that was when I decided, okay, there is a business idea behind this. So I wasn't considering to start something on my own. Okay, that's when it all started. So then I started giving it to chefs. But in terms of the courage I got, so I had a good idea. The target audience for jackfruit is the educated working professionals who doesn't have time, who live in the city. Okay, so for us, we don't have the time to prepare jackfruit. So if it comes in a pack, within 10 minutes we can prepare the dish and give it to our children. So that's the target audience. I understand that community because 18 years I was one of those working professionals living in a city. So I understand I have the idea, I understand the community. I didn't have the courage to start a business of my own. That's when I analyzed what is there. So I looked at what is the unknown, what is known. The unknown is food business. I don't know the food business. I don't come from the food industry. So I was able to find a partner who understands the food business. So I was able to outsource the whole manufacturing, processing aspect of jackfruit. And then the rest is about marketing. Marketing is my area of expertise. So I focused on the brand, focused on the B2B business. That is, I was in enterprise marketing, so I understand the B2B business very well. So tying up with the 5-star hotels, corporate cafeterias, and to work with the Indian professionals across India through social media, that was something which I could handle. So there were more knowns than unknowns. Unknowns were outsourced, and the knowns I had to control over. And that is what I've been doing for the last 1 year, of which we launched the product in September. And if you haven't seen the news, media has just taken it off by storm because it's a great story. It's a good for India story. 80% jackfruit in India goes waste. It's a 2,000 crore loss to India's economy. And it's a shock absorber against farmer suicide. And the reason I'm saying that is during extreme drought, when all the other crops fail, jackfruit grows by itself. And it thrives in summer. And no one grows jackfruit. It just grows by itself. It's the last organic fruit left.
James,
Yep.
James, that's a wonderful story, but we're going to have to move on a little bit.
Yeah.
You see, that was the difficulty about this panel, because every single person here is enormously passionate about what that person is passionate about. And as you know, we have a tendency to want to tell the whole story when we're very passionate. That's very natural. We'll get back to your story, which is a marvelous story, and congratulations on your success.
Thank you, Mike.
Let's maybe not let me sort of give the short introduction. Let's get your passion to play for itself, shall we? Maybe we should start hearing what it is you're passionate about.
If you want to subject yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Mexico, a fisherman rode his boat real low.
tell us the rest of the story.
So that's a story called The Fisherman and the Banker. It's a long story.
Let's hear your story.
Sorry? No, I don't think you want to hear that. Huh? So my suggestion is this band is available on contraband.in. Our band's called Contraband. And you can go listen to it there. We've got the lyrics on. Yeah, but to cut a long story short, I'll introduce a little bit about myself. I've been working for about 19 years now, half in a company called ITC and last 9 years in HCL Technologies. And this is a band we formed in the basement of HCL in 2008. And right now, Contraband is a fairly interesting band. I don't know if guys here know a band called Parikrama. So if you know Parikrama, Contraband now is half HCL, half Parikrama. So our bassist and drummer were the original Parikrama guys, Chintan Kalra and Dilip Ramachandran. And what's happened is, to my mind, if I look at a trigger point, so obviously this is an area of interest, it's an area of passion. It's not an easy area to keep running because a band is an extremely difficult animal to run. Even if you're a musician, you can be a solo artist, but we are a 7-man outfit. So for 7 people to get together, work at it, produce music, that's the first single we launched about a month back, and we are currently doing an album. For me, the essential trigger point has been, there's a channel in Delhi called Hit 95 FM, which has an extremely competent RJ called Sarthak. And every Monday when you drive to work, you will find Sarthak bemoaning the Monday morning blues. It's almost as if driving to work is the biggest headache any of us could have. And what's terrible about that is we spend 80% of our lives in that workplace. And if that's the way we start thinking about it, what's happening to us? And I think the big problem I've always seen, and everything I'm speaking is from experiencing my own team, I find most professionals, like the way James just now spoke, I don't see people speaking about their jobs like that, with that kind of passion. And fortunately or unfortunately, there are very few of us who get into startups, or there's even a higher order, which is social work. So there's a rare breed of people who do that, and they get this kind of inspiration. Most normal people walk into office, shed their real personality like an overcoat, hang it at the door, and go sit and bang away on their laptops doing God knows what. And I think in the technology world, the more we get used to the fact that with cloud computing, mobility, big data, and things like that, all the jobs which can be automated will get automated. And sources of competitive advantage will only lie in what we can create. And if that's the case, then human beings in the workplace need to be happy, fulfilled, and extraordinarily creative. They have to contribute in their job, just the way James is contributing after 18 years of boredom, James. Everyone needs their own jackfruit, is my observation. And the problem I've seen is the biggest reason that everyone doesn't have their jackfruit is in the professional world, people sort of outsource their sense of self-esteem to things outside of themselves. So it's power, position, the money you make, the car you drive, and so on. And when we created this band, we called the music White Collar Rock. So the reason we have this band, the purpose is not just to blow off some steam to go and play some rock music. The purpose is to send a message, and that's why I made the point about musicians from Parikrama. These are some of the most famous musicians in the country. They have joined because the band has a purpose. And our purpose in a simple one line is create, not just consume. And this is a message I find working very well in my team, which is if your sense of self-esteem is derived from what you can create, as opposed to our consumption habits. I seriously don't give a shit what car you drive, how much your suit costs, which club you belong to. This is not your identifier. Unfortunately, that's what it's become in the corporate world. And if we snap out of that, we'll have a bunch of people in office who are happy, satisfied. Everybody will have their own jackfruit because their jackfruit is worth much more than the BMW that somebody else drives, which creates a pain in my neck. That's as simple as it goes. And I think the lessons I have learned, when you do a band does not have a hierarchical corporate structure. Nobody listens to anybody else. Musicians are extremely individualistic animals. To come together, create one sound, play a show together, there's a lot of give and take. So my biggest learning is I think it keeps me real. I think I respect everybody in this band, and therefore I respect everybody in my office. I respect everybody I professionally engage with, and I'm all the time keeping it real. I have no sense of entitlement, and I love the fact the Aam Aadmi Party has come into power in Delhi, because the message they send out politically is no entitlement is good. And these are some, so there are lots and lots of lessons, but be it as, just to keep it short, by being part of a band like this, I learn a hell of a lot, which helps me in the job. And vice versa, I think the band keeps continuing because all of us have brought our professional insight and knowledge and things like that into how we keep this band going.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your music with us. I'm not sure they're going to let you go before you sing live, but let's get back to that in a moment. And I support that, by the way, as well. Trader, absolutely. So AJ is the last panelist, and I don't know if you know this, but I want to be sure I get this right. But he won the first Gold Lion in Cannes for an Indian company. Did you know that? He was the man. But he's also a man who spent a long time in advertising and now have a different scenario because he's also following his passion. So let's hear what they are.
Right, thanks. Okay, Ajay Chandwani, I think some of you know me and some of you have worked with me as well. I started out of my MBA school first as in my summer project days as a copywriter. And what attracted me to communication was I felt that I could write and sort of create stimulus that could see some people reacting to it. In reality, after the placement happened, I got placed in a somewhat boring marketing company, which I realized within a month was the most boring thing going. So I followed my heart and joined advertising, which my professors discouraged me against because they said, why are you picking one small tip of a spectrum when you've trained as a marketing person? So that was the first lesson I learned about not following the rules and doing what your heart believes in. And so for a long time, I followed my heart and kept advertising as my base and continue to. My first 5 years, I worked on Colgate-Palmolive and in a company called Grant Canyon Eckhart, and which ultimately then was bought out. The Canyon Eckhart was bought out by Ted Bates, and then it moved to Y&R, and now continues with Rediffusion, etc. And then now has moved on to Bates, etc. So we have a situation where I moved on following the consumer products path into Lintas and low Lintas, and there for the next 7 years, I just switched, shall I say, stayed in the same market, but switched companies. So instead of Colgate, I was handling Unilever. So I did Pepsodent and Close-Up and Fair & Lovely, etc., and then became a director in Unilever, on Unilever products at Low Lintas. And then for the next 10 years, again, without really doing something crazy like starting your own thing, I did the next best thing, which is I convinced Alec Padamsee and Prem Mehta and others in Low Lintas to start a subsidiary called SSC and Lintas, which I did not have even a single share in the now, looking back, I think that must have been a foolish move, but since I've always worn the heart on my sleeve, it was more important to do that rather than to be paid for it or to worry about. Valuation was not even a term invented, at least at that time. So SSC and Lintas went from 0 to 100 crores in about 6 or 7 years' time, and they are the agency that won the first Gold Lion and went on to win 100 international awards. And the Mercedes-Benz, Smirnoffs, and the Marico Parachute, some of the brands that today are pretty much called marquee brands. All the fundamental, shall I say, market building effort happened during that period. Those of you who are familiar with the story of Indian marketing, those who slipped into the markets during Doordarshan era managed to get this colossal audience, which today, if you want to really get, you have to spend that much more. So it's my theory that the brands of the 90s had it much easier when they could actually reach out, as long as they had the budgets to really pay for it, to really make their markets, which is so much harder today in a fragmented media situation. So moving on from SSC and Intas, which I wound up about a few years ago in terms of my own involvement, I joined Percept as a director on the board of Percept, and at first as a CEO and then as a director. And in this intervening phase, thanks to the workaholism of advertising and the passion that I happened to defer my marriage by several years, and when I eventually got married, I realized that I had my first child when my friends actually had their teenaged children, you know. So they were actually getting married, and I was creating babies. So we had a situation where I stumbled onto something called photography because I had a daughter in the family, and now I have, of course, two. And so I, from just taking pictures of my daughter, I stumbled onto nature and wildlife. And I discovered that shooting the tiger was always my passion. And it's after I started taking pictures, which were surprisingly good, I upgraded my equipment. I moved on from amateur to semi-professional, eventually to professional, and I went on to buy what the National Geographic and the Formula One drivers use, which are really the prime lenses of Canon. And even today, I have not managed to convert that into a professional life. But the joy of simply shooting the tiger, or eventually then birds, etc., got me hooked to this thing called wildlife photography, so much so that The Sound of Forest was like, as somebody put it, it was like a call of where you belong from. And it's almost like saying, you came from the earth and you need to give something back to the earth, and being there gave you a certain joy no office in the world would ever do. So those few days may have been an antidote to stress, but it eventually was very creative. I follow Buddhist philosophy where you say that the only thing you remember by is the value you create, and which is the people you touch and the people's lives you change, and not your bank balance or whatever is transitory, because you don't carry that with you, but you leave behind the value that you create. So I felt that through these pictures, I would be able to share with friends and also popularize. In the recent last 6 months or so, one small thing which I might share with you, even though I'm not switched to a professional instance, some stage you will see a website and hopefully an exhibition and some coffee table books, as Michael has promised that he'll have new technologies to really share some of these images. But United Nations Forum of Forests did a worldwide competition and sent in a picture in the hope that this untutored sort of approach to photography might find some acceptance. And one of the pictures did get selected as the top 15 in the world, which went all around the world to popularize nature and forest visiting, because urban life is so devoid of this, and India particularly has such a wealth of forests. So I moved on to my second passion, which is really tribal and folk art. Here it was my wife who actually started visiting villages of India. She's actually an HR professional, but she started villages of India and met these beautiful artisans who are creating paintings, whether they are tribal artists as in Santhal in Bengal, Gond in MP, and Varli in Maharashtra, Saura in Orissa. Similarly, folk art, which is Patachitra in Orissa, and then you have the Kalamkari in South in Andhra. And of course, Bengal, which has a fair amount of folk art as well, Patachitra as well, and Kalighat. So these artists and weavers and people who are really, I would call them magicians of art, living in these very, very difficult conditions, being able to hardly sell their works for a few hundred rupees in almost like a commodity, like the way you would sell bananas and oranges out in a market. So we said, maybe we can convert this into a big idea, which is really take it onto an e-commerce platform, organize it. And the question I asked myself is, how come in France and Italy you see African Aborigine art, you see Australian Aborigine art, but you don't see Indian tribal art or Indian folk art? So the whole mission was to first empower them, raise their market worth, and then take it globally and give it worldwide. So these are two passions. How does it link back to my work? I think the fact I spent years looking at commercial photography and looking at writers and other things in advertising helped me take those pictures, because I'd been looking at layouts and compositions all my life, but now here I was candid by myself. And the art was really, again, fueled by art, the fact that you're surrounded by creative people around you. So that's my story.
It's very interesting. I think we have 10 minutes or so left. Is that right? Yeah. So I'd like to ask a few questions because it seems you have similar stories, but yet you've approached them differently. You went from the biggest software company in the world to become an entrepreneur. Winifred, you've integrated your passion in everything you've done since you were 4 years old when you became an entrepreneur, which is amazing in itself. You told me earlier that you have a 9-to-5 where you do your job, and then you do your music, your passion, in weekends, and you found the flex time model where you don't necessarily have like a full-time commitment to your job, and then somehow mix that with your passions. So what is the advice that you can give? Now, you have different approaches to this, but you probably had passions even before you started, you became an entrepreneur. How does people find a balance between the passion and whatever gives them money? James, you want to?
The question is, how do you bring your passion back into your life and then debate what do you do with your professional life, right? So for 4 years, to me, without affecting my professional life, I was able to bring my passion back into my life, which is about a life surrounded by nature, spirituality, farming, many generations of friends and families. So as Krishnan mentioned about being a creator, so what happened to me, within a year I moved back to my hometown. My family has become a net producer of food than consumer. Because we were able to go back into farming, we were able to use our land into farming. So from a net volume, mass point of view, we were able to call myself a net producer. And so when the point I'm saying, okay, if you are working on your passion, your performance goes 10 times more because you're fulfilling a certain gap within you. Okay, so you don't have to let go your professional world to work on your passion. You should be able to do it both in parallel. So, and the way I did was, I wrote an article about it. Honey, I shrunk my working hours, and that is about focusing, becoming a specialist. When I have 5 years, I kept the same role, and I can sleepwalk into that job. So by doing that, I was able to release so much time from work, and that is what I used to bring my passion back in life. And second, by working from home, every day I saved 90 minutes per day by not getting stuck in a traffic, of which 45 minutes I gave back to work, 45 minutes I gave to my passion. So that's a wasted, so that's how I balanced it out. So to me, for my intellect, I need to be in the professional world. That is what I'm trained for. But for my spirit, I need to work on my passion. I need to have both. If I take an early retirement and work on my passion, I'll be miserable. Okay.
Mine is much more simpler. It's probably because of my age that I'm more wiser and I can reflect on a lot of things. My success has been, my self-branding is, this is what you see. This is Winifred. I don't live anybody else's life, but my life. I live it now, and I do things now, because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. My advice is take risks, big risks. Doesn't matter whether you're a failure or whether you win. Take it, because you're always going to regret it. Make good friends. They're very valuable. Tell them you love them all the time, every day. Believe in and get yourself a mentor. I'm privileged to be a mentor to many people, many that I don't even know that comes through my marketing portal phone calls that I get. Travel, be streetwise, understand the needs of other people, think from the customer's point of view, upwards. Design your strategies from the customer's point of view. The problem we marketers have, we want to market the way we want to market the organization or products and services. Look what your customers has got. And the last thing is just live a rich life. I'm not talking about money. Money you can get anywhere. But live a rich life by tapping into wonderful people and just be around those that gives you a lot of energy. That's my life philosophy.
Simple as that. What do you say?
So I don't know, the way I deal with it, like you said, Michael, so 5 days of work, Saturday with family, Sunday with music. So I think if you just think about the way I lead my... So what don't I do now? I don't normally go to pubs unless the band's playing. I only hang out with people who are creative in their own right. So they're also pretty good about... I hardly ever watch television. So that's it. I think we have a lot of time. I don't play golf. I don't pretty much do anything other than these three things I described. And that keeps me happy. So I think as long as you know what makes you happy and you can focus your time doing that, you'll be pretty all right.
Right. Yeah, I think many ways to deal with it. I think somewhere I read that if only you can play all day, then you'll really be happy. The question is playing at work, which really makes you happy. And somewhere down the line, we know about happiness being transitory and that being permanent. And I think there's a word to describe that. Sometimes we get fooled by what we call transitory happiness, where we get happy about what you acquire, and then you realize this is really not permanent. What really makes you happy is something else. So I discovered that, for example, I have been dropping